This talk about one nation, one election is going on for quite some time. As all of you are informed, I'm sure lawyers, any concerned citizen would know, a committee headed by former President of India was constituted to examine this matter. They submitted a report. The exercise is going on. And as it was mentioned, the parliamentary committee is looking into it. They have been summoning people to address them. The former Chief Justice of India was called. So a lot of things happened. But this slogan, one nation, one election, is in vogue for some time, at least 2-3 years. In that background, just on the lighter note, a few weeks back, somebody sent me a WhatsApp message. It was an interesting, hilarious message. The message consists of a cartoon. I don't know where it was published. Somebody forwarded it to me. The cartoon is about some gentleman, quote unquote, call him gentleman or otherwise, fully drunk, holding a bottle and holding a lamppost and crying, "One nation, one rate, please." And of course, in the background, whiskey rate in Karnataka is 920 rupees and in Goa is 320 rupees. So therefore, his problem is one nation, one price. So everybody has his own problem about one nation, one price, one nation, one election, what else. Point is, wonderful. It sounds very nice to hear that we should have one election for the whole nation at one point of time. If we examine the objects and reasons given in the bill, what are the reasons given for this proposal? Is that in the present system, they mentioned from 1950 to 1962, all elections to the Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies took place simultaneously. People were very happy. People were happy or not, it's a different story, I'm not on that. And afterwards, the deviation started for various political reasons, which all of us, anybody who is sincerely following the politics and the political scenario of the country know why these things happened. There was a deviation. Parliament elections were not simultaneous with legislative assembly elections in all these states. Some states, it's still simultaneous. Some states, it is not simultaneous for XYZ reasons. Now, what the objection reason say is, this is creating a lot of unwanted consequences. The nation is constantly faced with elections in some part of the country or other. Second reason is, once an election process is on, a code of conduct comes into force. All of us know there's something called a code of conduct for that period of 30, 40, 45 days, whatever it is. No major policy decision can be taken by any government, either here or there, either in Kerala or Delhi or Andhra Pradesh, any place. Therefore, there is a disturbance in the administrative process. Governments are not able to do their best that period. Third, a huge amount of manpower is required to conduct elections. And when they are withdrawn from the regular service and deployed in connection with the election duties, to that extent, their service is not available to the people for that limited period of time, which according to the bill, these are the avoidable factors if only we adopt this amendment of one nation, one election. Wonderful. The idea is good. I have no quarrel with the ideas. Yes, it's better that things are done at one go. And the administration spends minimum time on election meeting process. because there are 28 states in the country and union territories, parliament, so many elections have to take place. Somewhere or the other, some disruption is bound to be there whenever there is an election. So therefore, the idea to minimize the impact is a laudable idea. I have no quarrel with it. But question is it possible, even as framed under the amendment is the question. In my opinion, I'll give you the reasons why I think so. This doesn't happen. This act still, for the benefit of the gathering, I'm sure some of you, maybe all of you have read the bill, I don't know. But for the benefit of a few who have not read it, I'll give you the scheme of the bill, the amendment. So those who have read will forgive me for troubling you once again with the details. All of us know, I think Kerala election is due next year, Mr. Kuru. 26 is next year. That's 27. Okay, sometime. Recently we had Lok Sabha election all over the country. In different states, the situation is different. Andhra Pradesh, we had an election just 6 months back. Telangana, about a year and a half back, so on and so forth. The point is, the proposed amendment says, once this constitution amendment comes into force, whenever the next Lok Sabha election is held, as it is the next Lok Sabha election, as it stands, the constitution stands today, is due in 2029. Now, once this bill, of course, there is no guarantee, even at the parliament level, we have seen in the history, last 50 years, we have seen on more than one occasion, the parliament was dissolved, if you recollect, 1989, when Mr. Rajiv Gandhi was the Prime Minister. The parliament was dissolved slightly ahead of the due date because of that Bofors problem, if you recollect. What followed thereafter, Mr. V.P. Singh became the Prime Minister, and then you remember what all happened. The government fell down. Mr. Chandrasekhar became the Prime Minister, and then that thing. Or if we go a little backward, 77 general election, Janata Party came to power, Morarji Desai became the Prime Minister. It was about less than 2 years the government fell, and somebody else, Mr. Charan Singh, became, all this. So these things, there's no guarantee that the parliament itself will run for full 5 years all the time. It's good that sometimes it goes, sometimes it need not necessarily go. Now under the amendment, when the amendment comes into force, whenever the next election to the parliament takes place, on the first day of the sitting of the newly constituted parliament, elected parliament, Lok Sabha, I'm sorry for using the word parliament, Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha is a continuing body, is declared an amendment to be the appointed date. And normal tenure, of course, this bill doesn't propose to amend the tenure of either of these bodies, parliaments or assemblies. Tenure is still 5 years. So the period of 5 years will be reckoned from that appointed date, that is the first sitting of the newly elected Lok Sabha members, next time, whenever it is, 5 years. But by then, in different states, in different legislative assemblies, elections would not be conducted because you are going to election next year, 26. The normal course, your election would be 31. Andhra Pradesh had last month, 6 months back, 24. 29 it comes along with this. All this is under the belief that Parliament continues till 29. We'll take it. So sometime after 29, the appointed date comes into thing. And if any election takes place after that, your Kerala state goes to election in 31. And if the notification of the appointed date is in 29, the newly elected Kerala Legislative Assembly would have a lifespan of less than 5 years. It will end the day the next parliament ends. That is, if the election takes place in 29 May or April, whatever is the date, and its term would expire in 2034, you elect somebody in 2026, you will be due for an election in 31. From 31, normally you should continue till 36. No, your assembly also will expire in 34. Some 1.5, 2 years short of the full length of this thing. This problem arises in most of the states. There are only few states as of today which are due to have an assembly election simultaneously with the parliament. Even those states, there is no guarantee that they would have a simultaneous election. We have seen in history, political history of this country, assemblies are sometimes dissolved for 101 political reasons. I'll give you one example which I know from my own parent state. In 1983, there was a general election to the Legislative Assembly. Late Mr. N.T. Ramarao, for the first time, became the Chief Minister with a thumping majority. A lot of things happened, at least the older generation, people of my generation know these things. Youngsters may not know. People of my generation know what all had happened. His government was pulled down, XYZ happened, then it was restored. Then Mrs. Gandhi died, Lok Sabha election took place. And after all this turmoil, Mr. Ramarao decided, see, a lot of these MLAs created problems at that point of time. I don't want, I'll seek a fresh mandate from the people. In less than 2 years, in 1983 January, election took place, 5th January election took place. 1985 again, he dissolved the assembly and went sought a fresh mandate. He won once again with a few more seats than what he got in 82. That's a different story. I am not on that. So there are innumerable instances in this country with reference to each one of these states where the tenure of the Legislative Assembly need not always run for full 5 years. For various political reasons, it may not go on. What happens if this amendment comes into force is this. Whenever your election earlier, all right, we take a concrete example, same example we have taken. Mr. N.T. Ramarao went for a second election in 85 January or February. Under the existing scheme of the Constitution as of today, the newly constituted assembly would have a full tenure of 5 years. Now, if such a thing were to happen today, the newly constituted assembly would have a limited tenure, not of 5 years. It's coterminous with the Lok Sabha of the day. If the Lok Sabha were to be dissolved in the next 2 years, you will also go out. Now, whether all this is really good, bad, I don't want to pass any judgment here. They are all value judgments, political values. I don't want to say, not that time. It's not necessary for us. Question is, would it in any way achieve the purpose sought to be achieved? What is professed in the objection reasons is, we'll minimize the election time, we'll minimize the expenditure, we'll save the time of the various members of the service who are deployed in the context of the election. All this we'll avoid and we'll promise some wonderful utopia to the people. Fine, if you get utopia, nothing like it. But question is it going to happen? We must learn from experience. All this document, this constitution document that I started when I started Madras, was drafted by people who are much more experienced and much more learned, the averages you take. Even now there may be brilliant people in the parliament, learned people, experienced people. But take as a class, the members of the Constituent Assembly were experienced people who had seen. I don't want to hurt anybody. The situation in Kerala is slightly different. I know something about Kerala because I worked here. You go to some of these states, in fact, take my own home state, why do you want to go to some other place? Election comes. Suddenly some nice gentleman comes from US who has been in US for the last 20 years, made a lot of money there. comes and contests the election. He had nothing to do with the people of this country. I mean, may genuinely love, I don't doubt their love for the country, I'm not on that. But then he was absent for 10 years, 15 years, they come, they apply tickets, and some of these nice people, gentlemen or ladies, simultaneously apply to 2-3 parties for a ticket. Whoever gives will contest. I have known personal examples of it. So the point is, with this kind of an electoral, democratic system which we have today, thinking that by bringing this amendment, all elections will be simultaneous and minimize all the expenditure, all wastage of energy is simply a hallucination. It is not going to take place according to me. If it happens, wonderful. Anyway, I'm at the fag end of my life's journey. Maybe another, God willing, of course, Kerala being a communist state and communist government, you may not believe in God. Well, assuming everything favorably, maybe another 10 years, or maybe tomorrow morning, God knows, who knows. It may happen anytime. There's one uncertainty in the universe. But I see a lot of younger faces, much younger than me. You people will watch it, how far this is going to help. We don't even have to wait for the event. Just look at the text of the amendment. The Parliament, the draftsman, himself is conscious of the fact that such things can happen. Say, the proposed amendment, Article 82A. Article 82A is proposed to be introduced in the Constitution. What does it say? I'll skip what I told you. The President may, by a public notification issued on the date of the first sitting of the House of People after a general election, bring into force the provisions of this article, and the date of the notification shall be called the appointed date. Now, what happens after the appointed date? Notwithstanding anything in Article 83 and 172, the term of all legislative assemblies constituted in any general election held after the appointed date. I gave you the example. 29 is the next Lok Sabha. If Kerala election takes place in 31, assuming everything goes normally, smoothly, your election is due in 31, the term of that assembly would be and therefore the expiry of the full term, notwithstanding anything and so on and so on. So, held after the appointed date and before the expiry of the full term of the House of the People shall come to an end on the expiry of the full term of the House of the People. That is the Lok Sabha. Your 31 election, the assembly would be valid only for 3 years or 4 years. This is the purpose sought to be achieved. Anyway, we will think it is good. At least maybe by the next election things will even out, because by then assembly, parliament, everything will go simultaneously. Hope. There is no guarantee. Politics, anything can happen. We have seen prime ministers falling in 6 months, 3 months we have seen. Somebody was, I think Mr. Chandrasekhar was there for 115 days. Kuru? Chandrasekhar's prime minister was 115 days, if I remember right. And Gujarat, much less, perhaps. Okay, Gujarat. So therefore, there is no guarantee that the next parliament itself will run for 5 years. Now, forget it for the time being. Clause sub-article 5, 82.5 is more important in the context of what we are discussing. If the election commission is of the opinion that the elections to any legislative assembly cannot be conducted along with the general election, notwithstanding all this constitutional amendment and this exercise, and this slogan, wonderful slogan of one nation, one election. Finally, it all depends on the election commissioner, chief election commissioner, the election commission. If you think, look here, it's all very fine in the constitution, but I think in Kerala, election can't be conducted tomorrow, simultaneously with the Lok Sabha. Along with the general election to the House of People, it may make a recommendation to the President to declare by an order that the election to that legislative assembly may be conducted at a later stage. So far, the Constitution, the provisions of the Constitution are clear. Whenever the election is held, yes, there also there is some pliability. Sometimes the election is, we have known cases, under certain extreme circumstances, assemblies were kept under suspension and elections were not dissolved, not conducted, president's rule was imposed. Even in the present system, these things happen. There is a whole exercise for that imposing president rule and all. Now you simply hand it over to the election commissioner, chief election commission. If the election, how does the election commission believe election can't be held simultaneously? Well, of course, we know what happens in the election commission, all of us. It is applied, we have been hearing a lot about these things. Wonderful. Then, election will be postponed, it will not be held along simultaneously. Then it will be held 6 months, 1 year, whenever the election commission is pleased. Even then what happens, the Constituent Assembly so elected would still have a shorter term, because in the meanwhile the Lok Sabha election took place. The period starts running. So you will only get the remainder period. So the will of the people of Kerala, I am not trying to whip up any regional feelings. I am only discussing logic. The will of the people of Kerala will be subject to the will of the rest of the country. We vote, we elect people who we hope under the Constitution or the elected people will be there for 5 years. If in between these people let us down, quarrel and pull down the government, that's a different story. Otherwise it runs for 5 years. Now it doesn't depend upon these people quarreling or those people quarreling. The rest of the country, what they decide, it depends on that. Whether it's strictly part of a federal system and federal committee is a question which each one of you will have to discuss and think it over for yourself. Now, similarly, one more provision which requires our attention. This is broadly what is going to happen if these provisions come into force. Now take this case, a legislative assembly is elected. The Lok Sabha is continuing. Forget about the legislative assemblies for a minute. What happens to the parliament? If an election to the parliament is held, normally under the present system it should run for 5 years unless the MPs quarrel and political parties quarrel and pull down the government. Various experiments are carried, coalitions, so many things. Whatever may happen will happen. It will continue to happen even after the amendment. Now, if a fresh election is held, just take the concrete example, 89, VP Singh government came to power in Delhi. It ran for some 16, 18 months, if I remember right. Then it fell and Mr. Chandrasekhar became the Prime Minister for 115 days. Once again that government fell. We went for an election. 91 summer, the election took place. The elected parliament continued till 96, Mr. Narasimha Rao's government continued. I am taking the names only for easy reference, not with any other purpose. 5 years. Now under the amended provision, in such a situation, if Mr. Narasimha Rao's election were to take place, he will not have 5 years. He will only have 3 years because of the amendment. Even the parliament, once it is dissolved, he will only have the remainder period. All this is supposed to be reduce the burden on the system and then ensure less time is spent on electioneering process, less money is spent by the state. Individual candidate spending is a different story. The state, the country is spending less money. Is it going to be achieved? We will still have multiple elections running all the time in the country somewhere else. It all depends on the political atmosphere of the country, occurring in different parts of the country. This is broadly the problem with this. And more importantly, as I mentioned to you, all this is now dependent upon the opinion of Election Commission. At least earlier, this individual discretion was not there. If the elected government, for whatever reason, recommends to the governor to dissolve the assembly, and the recommendation is accepted, barring some extraordinary situations like extremism and some problems which we have seen in some parts of the country, normally elections are held within a short period, a month, 2 or 3, depending on some administrative adjustment. Election Commission will have to get ready for the election, so on, so. And then the election conducted thereafter. Now, it is automatically, after the assembly is dissolved, parliament is dissolved, in reasonable time the election is to be held, and then they continue for 5 years. Now it is the opinion of the election commission. The constitutional function of having elections, representative government at the national level and state level, finally may depend upon the whims and fancies of the election commission. And even that's not final. Any decision taken by the election commission is once again subject to a judicial challenge, once again run around the courts, SR Bommai, all kinds of arguments are advanced, Mr. Kurup, you know. What kind of arguments can be advanced when the election commission decides that? Now, what is it that we are going to achieve ultimately? What is it that the people of this country are going to get out of this amendment? I am simply not able to comprehend. Maybe my mind is so small and I'm not intelligent enough to understand the grand scheme behind these things. But I express my doubts before you. It's for the people of this country to examine these things, whether this kind of an amendment would do any. I'm not saying the amendment by itself is bad because X, Y, Z is proposed. I'm not at all on that. Will this logically help the people of this country in any way? Will it serve any purpose? If it doesn't serve any purpose, let us not have it. We can very humbly tell all the members of the parliament sitting there today who will consider this bill, Sir, please don't do this. We are not going to benefit from this. We can say that. After that, they listen or don't listen is up to them. So let the debate go on. Let us please examine the provisions. I told you briefly what is the scheme of this amendment. Each one of you, I request to examine by yourself what is going to happen. And please remember always, you remember your history, the history of this country post-50, how elections were conducted, how governments fell, how governments continued, all kinds of things. You please remember. And don't believe this experiment can perhaps succeed on one condition. If some party, whoever it is, continues to be in power in Delhi for next 500 years, well, of course, but then in history, no dynasty ruled for 500 years continuously. No political party ruled any country for that long period. What will we get out of this? Please think it over. If you are convinced what I am saying, there is some sense in what I am saying, please tell me. I am not asking you to make any gadbad. Just tell your local MPs, sir, please look into it. It is not going to help us. Don't vote this bill. And please tell 10 more people so that they can influence your local MPs, because ultimately they are going to vote this bill. That's the role of we the people in this country. I'm grateful for this opportunity. Thank you.